let's get to it. It's my pleasure to introduce our panel. We are joined today by Sue Praught. Sue is an organizational health consultant for integrated health solutions at Sun Life. This is a special kind of unit of Sun Life that helps support the workplace health objectives of Canadian organizations. Next up, we have Lisa Beech-Hawley. Lisa is the Health and Safety Program Manager at Ontario Power Generation. Lisa has been a certified professional ergonomist since 2002 and has previously served as the past president of the Business Council on Occupational Health and Safety. She is currently vice chair of the Ontario Business Coalition. And OPG actually took home silver for Best Ergonomics Program at 2023 OHS Honors. Last and most certainly not least, we have Ken Brodie. Ken is the Senior HSE Specialist for Modern Niagara Vancouver. So Ken got up a little bit earlier than the rest of us this morning to join the panel. So thanks for that, Ken. A team-oriented leader, Ken believes the secret to business optimization lies in centering both employees and customers in all activities. So Modern Niagara Vancouver actually took home the Gold Award for Best Ergonomics Program at 2023 OHS Honors. So we have a wonderful panel of experts with us today. So let's get into this. Lisa, I'm going to start off our conversation today with you. So MSIs, which are also known as MSDs, are among the most common injuries in any workplace. We've seen the data behind that. So when you look at OPG, you look at your industry, what are some of the highest risks for injury?
Well, the utilities industry is very broad. It involves a wide variety of types of work in different environments, everything from working out of a helicopter on high voltage transmission lines to working in a radioactive environment in a nuclear station to working in offices or doing custodial work. And there's a lot of geographic diversity and different workplaces. For example, OPG operates a diverse mix of 75 power generating stations, including 66 hydroelectric dams, 2 nuclear stations, as well as solar, biomass, and natural gas. And in our hydroelectric business, we have 240 dams on 24 river systems in Ontario. So all that is to say is that there's a lot of variability in the locations and conditions of work that our employees encounter, including exposure to the weather, and all kinds of unexpected MSD hazards can be faced, including trying to get your stuck snowmobile out of a snowbank. And then there's how work environments were designed. They were all designed, of course, to operate very safely and productively, but not necessarily designed with the humans who will be working there in mind. Several of our hydroelectric stations have been operating for more than a century, and even our nuclear stations were built in the 1970s and 80s. About half of our workforce at OPG are skilled tradespeople whose jobs often require working in awkward positions and forceful exertions, and sometimes very repetitive activities when certain tasks have to be completed during a particular window of time, such as what we call during our outages when the stations are shut down for maintenance or improvements. And time is money in the nuclear station. When you're not generating electricity, it's a lot of money that's being lost. So it's very, very important to support the generation of electricity all the time. And then there's some complications about the types of PPE that's required. In the nuclear stations where radiation personal protection equipment is required, these are like bulky air supplied suits with hoods and booties worn over traditional PPE of hard hats and safety boots and safety glasses and multiple layers of gloves, all of which may exacerbate MSD hazards related to forceful gripping, tool use, body movement and positioning, and postures of your head related to visibility. And in the utilities industry in general, there are psychosocial stressors that can also contribute to risk of MSDs. So often there's work done under time pressure, as I mentioned, has to be done with meticulous care and accuracy, frequently involving high severity safety hazards like working at heights or confined spaces or electrical and chemical hazards. And there's recent re-recognition, I would say, on the fact that there's a lot of impact of psychosocial and psychological stressors on risk of MSDs. And then, of course, thousands of our staff work in office environments exposed to those typical MSD hazards of prolonged work on computers. And in recent years, mainly since COVID, all the staff have laptop computers now, which is great for mobility and moving around. But when people work on a laptop alone for frequent or prolonged periods of time, that increases exposure to poor postures, of course. And then there's the work from home arrangement. So certain of our employees work on a hybrid arrangement from home part of the week, which again, people love for balance and variety, but it can be challenging for people to set themselves up in good working postures at home. And although the severity of office ergonomics related hazards might not be as significant as in our industrial environments, the exposure time and the number of people exposed still makes this a significant safety issue for us.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Ken, I wouldn't mind getting your thoughts on this as well. Maybe you can kind of walk us through a little bit about the types of tasks that your workers are doing in your industry, and where you're seeing the highest risk for injury when it comes to MSIs.
Sure, great, Todd. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's Ergonomics Month here at WorkSafe BC, and BC, I don't know if it's the rest of Canada, but welcome aboard. Modern Niagara, we're a large mechanical contractor. We have offices across Canada. And here in Vancouver, we have roughly 600 plumbers, sheet metal workers, and welders, material handlers. Probably 50 of the plumbers are what you'd think would be the traditional plumber. They do the service calls, they're under the sinks, they're working in awkward spaces, they're fixing emergency leaks, doing building maintenance. And then, so lots of tight spaces, rushed work. And whenever it's a water emergency, they're stretching and reaching and awkward positions. So it really causes wear and tear on the body, right? The bulk of our workers, right, they work in our major projects, which is over a $5 million job, up to $2 billion jobs. And these are mega projects, and they're installing the underground piping, the large diameter underground piping, high grade pipes in the buildings, valves, boilers, other fixtures, right? And plumbers often face the risk of back and spinal injuries due to just the physical demands of their work. They're lifting heavy objects, pipes, working in confined spaces. They're always adopting awkward positions. And they're, like Lisa said, they're quite often forceful positions. They're carrying, lifting, pulling, or else they're in stationary positions for a long time. So they get the vibrations from the drills and the other power tools. That's also a concern. And what the injuries can range from is just muscle strains to even herniated discs. And what they do, it does cause debilitating pain and restricted mobility, right? A lot of our workers, they do work in extreme temperatures, and not so much in BC as maybe Ontario or Alberta, but it does get cold and it rains here a lot. They're working at heights, they're climbing ladders, and there's often a lot of repetitive movements, right? So slips, trips, falls, it's always something we worry about. Work in our sheet metal plant, we have two shops, a sheet metal and piping division, and the fabrication, they have their own set of risks. So we have massive, sophisticated machinery, and it handles the sheet metal parts as they move from the cutting to the bending. But at some part, a worker actually has to lift things, right? They have to assemble it, they have to move things around. So just the physical acts of lifting, moving parts, that hasn't even left. Even if you're the most roboticized factory type of building, you still have the manual movement, right? Twisting, bending, reaching. And this occurs on the sheet metal and the piping, right? You got to bend down to unload pallet boxes. So that's below waist level. And we have large diameter spiral air ducts and air handling units, right? They don't really have handles on them. So they're awkward to move, right? So we do have all these ergonomic issues, and we analyze the movements and try to find better ways to do it.
Great, thanks, Ken. And Lisa, I think that kind of defined nicely what some of the issues that we're seeing in a couple different sectors. So, Sue, I want to kind of move the conversation over to you now. When you look at this issue, what are some of the most common misperceptions that organizations have when it comes to ergonomics and doing tasks in a manner that doesn't, elevate that risk for injury?
Thanks. So I'm going to talk more in the context of the office environment. I work at Sun Life. Majority of employees at Sun Life obviously are in an office environment where we, there's certainly issues that arise from that, as Lisa's already touched on. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions about ergonomics, but I think I'm just going to touch on two. So the first one is that many employers feel that from the ergonomic standpoint, you only have to worry about people who have a musculoskeletal issue, like a bad back or repetitive strain injury. But ergonomics is actually very, very critical for everybody because it's all about prevention. So it's important for all employees. So, we talk about typing and data entry and it's not much of a problem when we do it for a short period of time, but that's not the real work world, right? So we think about it, we type and we hit keyboards hundreds and hundreds of times, day after day, hour after hour, year after year, which gradually can cause wear and tear on our muscles and our tendons. So it's not all about the person with the problem. It's all about preventing all of us from getting into trouble. So prevention is really, really important. MSK injuries don't happen with one single event. It's not like a sprain, strain, or fracture. It's repetition. In the 2023 Benefits Canada Healthcare Survey, I had a look at that. There's some interesting data around MSK injuries and ergonomics and sort of back to that misperception. So said in that study, 72% of employers feel that they support their employees who are having MSK issues. When they surveyed employees in that study, 65% of employees feel that their work environment is actually creating aches and pains. So something just to think about, I think, from the organizational standpoint. May have a great program, but is it a good program? So it's all about prevention. It's all about supporting all employees, no matter whether they have a medical issue or not. The second misperception, I think, that we forget about is we tend to put physical injuries and issues in a little box. And we forget that there's much more to what that MSK issue means. So what I mean by that is there's a strong linkage between physical health and mental health. And we know this. When you've got chronic pain, you feel crummy, it impacts your mental health. If the design of your work environment isn't great and you start to have discomfort, you're less productive, it impacts your mental health. It also impacts the mental health and wellness of your family and those around you. So again, I think I'm just continuing in this circle back around to prevention. We need to take care of how our employees work so that it keeps them happy and healthy, but it also, that whole mental health and emotional wellness doesn't sort of transfer into our lives. Just another stat from that 2023 Benefits Canada Healthcare Survey, 36% of employees with chronic pain stated that their mental health was poor. So we know that, but I think those are the two misperceptions. Take care of all your employees, not just the wounded and injured, and think about the bigger picture outside of that physical health and the ramifications on our mental health.
Great, thank you, Sue. Ken, I kind of want to ask you the next question. I know that at Modern Niagara, you guys kind of did the math. You figured out that ergonomic strains were probably, was it the number one source of injury, Ken, for your workers? Is that correct?
Yeah, it was, Todd. It was surprising because we have sheet metal is a huge part of our business, and we do a lot with sharp objects, and we're always working at height. So we thought, okay, it would be lacerations. But when we looked at our WorkSafe, we have an employees report, right? And it goes through all the stats. And we found that no, ergonomic musculoskeletal disorders, injuries were the number one issue by far.
Gotcha. So, once you discovered that information, what did you do with that? And how did you start to, practically tackle that to reduce that number?
Well, what we had to do is, like, first of all, we had to find out what kind of injuries, right? Were they back strains, shoulder strains, leg strains, whatever, right? And then, we we had an experience rating of 27.2%, right? It was a surcharge on our WorkSafe premiums, right? And it was scary because we knew we were going to get some large hospital jobs, right? Like the new St. Paul's is $2 billion job, and we are going to triple our workforce, right? So we knew if we didn't get a handle on these ergonomic problems fairly quick, it could be like really bad for us. So senior management, they immediately stepped up and then identified, we're not just going to confront the problem of ergonomics, we're going to actually take it as an opportunity and a challenge to do something and make proactive improvements, right? So we thought we have to do whatever we have to do. We have to do it right, and we have to include the following goals. It has to be effective with measurable impacts, right? It has to be significant with an overall impact to our workforce, and it has to be sustainable over a long period of time, right? So we didn't want our workers to join something and our management and then maybe backslide later on. So our first realization was to reduce the chance of injury, that work tasks should be designed to limit exposure to the risk factors, right? If we could limit it, that would be the number one thing. So engineering controls were the most desirable. And like in their fabrication shop, we installed the roller tables, right? Systems on our bandsaws and with tall pipe machines where you don't have to reach, you don't have to stretch. That's one of the main causes of musculoskeletal injuries, right? So we installed color-coded gantry cranes. Like these were electric hoists in our stainless steel shop, in our welding bays, in our loading docks. We repositioned work tables so no more long excessive reach, right? Everything was right at hand, right? It's like when you're working on your laptop, you want everything within reach, right? You don't want to be stretching, you want to be bending, leaning down, right? In the field, because we have a lot of field work, we purchased mechanical lifting devices, right? We designed new pipe storage racks, pipe carts, so we could move our material from one section of the building to another with no, usually a 1 or 2 man job, but no more lifting, right? In our offices, we installed the sit-down, stand-up desks, the ergonomic office chairs, and ergonomic keyboards and mouses. So that was for anybody who requested them, right? And really solving the ergonomic problems became part of the culture of Modern Niagara and the employees. And we really had the employees' involvement, right? Continuous improvement, and became the cornerstone of our mission, right? So management worked up and they opened up to the workers, and the workers were able to provide important information to us about hazards in the workplace. And they were also involved in the early stages of our program, right? So they could tell us what was a success in their section, and we could disseminate that information to other areas of our work. So everybody had the same information, we all work together. So workers were able to voice their concerns, and it was perfect, right? Now, do you know how we recognized some of I was going to go back to the first question, the misconceptions, right? That if you have the proper tools, if you have everything that you can buy, right, that's going to fix your ergonomic problems. And it's not the case at all, right? The myth is that just because you buy it, it's going to use it. But you actually have to train the workers in how to use this, right? And sit properly and learn, right? Because there's all sorts of tools, but if they're still straining, if they're still crouching down at the screen, looking at the screen, right? If they're still in a sit-down, stand-up desk, they're leaning over, craning the necks, it's not working. So when the workers know how to work it properly, it's going to do a lot for them, their ergonomic health. And I guess the other myth, back to what Sue was saying, it's probably that even if you have the best ergonomics program, the best ergonomics policies in place, a 1,000-page manual, if you don't actually put it into action, it's not going to work for you, right? You've actually got to utilize what you say you're going to do and then do it. So I don't know if that's a help, Todd.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. Thank you, Ken. Sue, just an FYI, we've got a little bit of chatter going on about that. Was it Benefits Canada study that you mentioned?
Yep, the 2023 Benefits Canada Healthcare Survey is the document. So if you Google Benefits Canada It's a survey they do every year, and it just came out in the summer. That's
Wonderful.
the
Yeah.
survey.
People
Yeah.
are asking for the link, so I think if you search for that, you should be able to find it. Just an FYI to everybody on the line today as well. We are doing some coverage post event of our discussion. We will make sure that we include a link directly to that data, so you'll be able to find that in the coming days as well. So just an FYI. Lisa, I kind of want to ask you a very similar question to Ken's, because I know that OPG did a very similar exercise about a decade ago. You completed a formal corporate MSD prevention strategy. And I think the numbers that we saw were that you dropped your injuries, your MSI-related injuries, from 40% to below 25% of all recordable injuries, which is obviously that's impressive. That's what we're all trying to do. So walk us through how you did that.
Okay, sure. Similar to what Ken was saying, OPG has always made safety our #1 priority, and we had a vision of 0 injuries. And we'd done a very good job at reducing injuries from high-risk hazards, such as falls and electrical contacts, through focused efforts on those hazards. But despite seeing significant improvements in our overall injury rate, the portion of all injuries that were MSDs had not decreased. And we recognized that if we were going to be able to progress towards our vision of 0 injuries, we needed to specifically tackle MSDs. So first of all, we recognized, similar to what Sue was saying, that MSD hazards and injuries were not reported in the same manner as for other hazards. So most workers and supervisors didn't really make the association between work and MSD. You know, there's a culture on the industrial side to just get the job done and be a man and don't complain, and it's just part of the job to be in pain all the time. And so it prevented people from speaking up, especially for lower level injuries or discomfort. And where people would speak up and report electrical hazards or slipping hazards to prevent someone from getting hurt, MSD issues were only reported after someone suffered an injury, not really recognized and reported before starting a job to prevent that. So we really benefited by following the Ontario MSD prevention guideline. We started by doing a gap analysis of our program against the elements of that guideline. And we developed a multi-year strategy and annual plans at our corporate level with expectations for all of our business units to establish their own plans. So the first year, we started at the top of what the guideline says. You need management, leadership, and commitment. So at a high level, our management gave direction to the organization, set this as a priority, and we ensured that we had worker involvement through having a tripartite. We have 2 unions, so a tripartite MSD prevention strategy team. And we started by developing an e-learning course on MSD prevention and awareness to train workers. As Ken said, you have to train workers in the hazards that they're exposed to and the equipment that you're providing them. So we train them on how to have the right eyes to identify MSD hazards and what examples of controls to prevent MSDs could be. And this course was made mandatory for all our employees, which was a big commitment from management, because 1 hour of time off the tools and off your job costs a lot of money to the company. So that was important that we had that commitment. And we included testimonial videos from actual employees and from both our industrial and office environments who had experienced MSDs, who talked about how impactful that was on their life, and to really sort of hit people in the heart and make them realize that if it could happen to that person, it could happen to me, and motivate people internally to take this seriously. And we've provided face-to-face training to groups at high risk for MSDs. So really facilitating discussion among those groups of their unique hazards and controls that could be considered. And then they say what gets measured gets done. So we set targets and tracked metrics to monitor our results, including creating an MSD specific injury rate on our monthly safety performance scorecard. And we set department targets for MSD hazard identification and reporting, and in a later phase for reporting ergonomic improvement success stories. And we had a database on our intranet to document these success stories so that other people could search for them and see if the other people had come up with solutions to issues that they might be facing. And Ken mentioned that as well. Sharing successes, sharing ideas is really helpful. And we created some tools, including checklists like for Joint Health and Safety Committee inspections, an office workstation self-assessment tool, a database for selecting powered hand tools to categorize vibration, force, and weight, and things like that, and posture, so that when people are selecting hand tools to purchase or use, they can see the comparison. And also a database of carts to help people select appropriate carts for the task to minimize push and pull force and optimize steering and that kind of a thing. And while our MSD injury rate did go up initially, people should be prepared for that because awareness improves and low level injuries and discomfort are more likely to be reported. But we were prepared for that. And by the 4th and 5th year of this multi-year strategy, the rate had significantly decreased and has continued to gradually, slowly decrease in that direction. And most importantly, the culture in the company around MSD shifted dramatically. Everyone understood the term MSD, which wasn't common before. And you can hear among the speakers on this panel that in different companies, in different provinces, in different perspectives, there's some slightly different terminology, but in our world, we use the term MSD, and we started seeing that in people's everyday language, which was great. And the identification of early symptoms and proactive identification of hazards improved a lot, and reporting of injuries became normalized, that people didn't have that perception that they weren't being tough if they were complaining about being uncomfortable. And most importantly, lots of things are most important. We integrated MSD prevention into our overall health and safety program. So doing parallel initiatives can get you a certain distance, but it really needs to be an integrated managed system process like everything else we do. And then, over time, because we were so successful in that period at reducing MSD injuries, other hazard areas became the top priorities, and the organization's focus turned to them. So it is a continuing journey. We don't want to let the foot off the gas too much on MSD prevention. So we continue to communicate and provide training and introduce innovations to support our frontline staff in preventing these injuries. So I do strongly want to encourage everyone to check out the MSD Prevention Guideline for Ontario. The website is msdprevention.com. They're releasing an updated and sleeker website at the end of this month, and they have a ton of excellent resources and guidance for starting out to very sophisticated health and safety programs, and it'll make it even easier with the updated website to find great resources.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Something you said kind of caught my attention because it's something that we've discussed a lot, at Just Canada. Just the notion of, when you start to tackle these things and raise awareness and do that, you will see your injury rate go up. And while that does seem counterintuitive, that's not a bad thing because it just means you're actually capturing what's happening. So maybe I'll pose this to all three of you, Sue, Lisa, Ken, whoever wants to tackle this, or maybe all three of you. How did you get your staff to understand, first of all, that it's okay to report these things, or even to be aware that, whatever strain or whatever pain they're feeling, maybe that's, maybe they always thought that was their normal part of the job, but maybe it's not. And maybe there's something they can do to prevent it or treat it. Or so how did you change I guess it's a culture change question. How did you get that those injuries are no longer being masked?
I think from my world and Sun Life, it just became sort of normal conversation. I think it started out with an initiative of just, here's some information. When we first went home, at the start of the pandemic, a lot of information was sent out to all employees on the importance of desk design, workstation setup. So that was sent out regularly, frequently. I think that's the importance of messaging. We all know that, the more you communicate in different ways, the more it's going to resonate and sink in. So I think for us, That's what's happened. We get information, we get, tip sheets, we get visuals. It's sort of front and center, and I think that's makes it okay to say, hey, I'm having some trouble, what can I do? So from our standpoint, that would be how I would respond to that.
Sure. Ken or Lisa, anything you want to add?
No, I guess, sorry, Lisa, when our team got involved, when we first started the program, we made it known, right, with the toolbox talks, with emails, safety talks, Josh committee meetings, that we're developing a new program. And we seem to get worker buy-in when they knew they could get treatment fairly quick, and there'd be as much help as we could give them. They just came on board, right? They just said, okay, this is what's happening, and what can we do to help? Instead of just putting it off and saying, okay, it's just a sprain, it'll get better and the next day or so, right? They actually came to us and approached us and said, this is what's happening, what can you do to help us? So it was an incredible employee buy-in from the very start.
Yeah, that's good. And one thing is that everyone has a musculoskeletal system, no matter what job you do. Everyone can relate to having pain and discomfort. So it's an easy conversation to have, and communicating to leadership and supervisors and so on that just because our actual sort of recordable injuries, medically treated and lost time injuries, might appear low, there's a lot of walking wounded people. There's a lot of people taking pain meds, using benefits for treatment, taking sick time, being distracted on the job because of pain or discomfort, not being able to get the work done safely and effectively. And even having pain or stiffness can increase the likelihood of other safety events like tripping or being distracted can increase risk of damaging equipment. So there's a lot of invisible negative impacts of not preventing these types of injuries and discomfort. And I think those kind of values, they say follow the money. If the company, not the workers themselves necessarily, but the company around them recognizes that there are a lot of negative things that can happen to the company due to these kinds of things, that it's a priority. But so they want people to speak up, and the ball gets rolling. Once some people start talking about it, others feel more comfortable and that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. Sue, I'm going to come to you next for this question. It's kind of a big picture question. You're listening to these stories from OPG and Modern Niagara, your own experience at Sun Life. So if you think about reducing injuries, what are some of the options that employers have in reducing these types of ergonomic issues?
Yeah, so from the big picture sort of strategy side of things, and I'm going to speak more of the sort of the in-office side of things right now. We'll talk a little bit about the home office a bit later, but the biggest thing is there has to be leadership commitment. There has to be involvement from senior leadership. It has to be a part of the organization's culture. Leadership needs to commit people, time, and money. I think there's a very important to have a MSK or health committee. When we call it MSK in the insurance world, musculoskeletal injuries, that's sort of our language rather than MSDs. I think you need a health committee, whether that's a subset of your health and wellness committee, but there needs to be participation at all levels of the organization that focus on the physical injuries that could occur. From this, I think there's a number of things that employers should do. And one about, for sure, giving employees the knowledge of how to adjust their chair, their monitor, their desk height. I did see in the chat that somebody had mentioned vision and eye care. Absolutely so important. We forget about that. That, for staring at the screen for hours and hours, and, our eyes are just like our, there's muscles in our eyes that slowly wear and tear. And so we have to remember with that vision piece. So education to employees on chair, monitor, desk height, mouse, keyboard, all those things, as well as vision. That can be done through webinars, individual assessments, but I think that's really important, just that basic knowledge. The other thing to think about, we've talked about tools and fit. Chairs, some organizations, they'll buy, 500 chairs, all the same. Well, that's not going to work if you've got somebody who's 6'6" and you've got somebody who's 5'1". You can't both sit in the same chair. So I think organizations need to think a little bit more broadly about the demographics of their organization. So knowledge is important, but equipment and the type of equipment, the size of equipment is really important. Secondly, I think managers need to have education and training just on basics, right? So they can support their employees, just like on the office side, basic, what does the work design look like? Just at a very high level, not experts, but could provide some insights or directing them to HR. The other thing I think we often forget is that this should be part of onboarding. So anytime a new person is hired, there should be education on the importance, the culture of your organization, on the importance of prevention, that it's taken seriously. We've got lots of resources, whether it's on an intranet for health and wellness resources, but there's also information on the ergonomics piece. But that should be done right at the date of hire, including what's in your benefit plan. If you do have some troubles, what coverage do you have for massage, chiro, physio, mental health? I've talked about that. So all those things I think need to be addressed right at the beginning of a person's employment with a company, and then ongoing forever, really. And that links into my I guess my next point is the concept of HR policies. And there has to be policies around practices and processes. And, we think about how, we're in front of our computers all day, every day. We have meeting heavy days where, you sit at your computer and go, okay, I got back to back meetings. When do I get a break? When am I going to get up and get something to eat? Some companies have developed a policy with shortened meetings. So meetings, the default on Zoom or Teams is a 45-minute meeting instead of a 60-minute meeting. So you've got a 15-minute break guaranteed between meetings. And, this is a process, this is a practice, but it still ties into repetition and prevention and taking a break from doing things over and over and over and over. And I think that's really, really critical. I think that's certainly from the big picture side, they're really important for employers to think about. I was doing a little bit of reading in preparation for this talk today, and there was an initiative that I saw that Toyota's done, and they actually have treatment on site. That's not super common, but sort of your unique approach to big strategy is, do you offer physical demands analysis on site? So back to the bigger, broader, I think important concepts is leadership, culture. It starts at the top.
Great, thanks. And that's actually a good segue to what I want to ask next, which is to Ken. Talking about physiotherapy and that kind of on-site service. Excuse me, I know, Ken, when we were looking at the nominations for OHS Honors, the judging panel was really impressed with what Modern Niagara Vancouver was doing, because you struck kind of a partnership to receive same-day physiotherapy and next-day physician assessments. So how does that work, and what results have you seen from having that benefit offered to your teams?
Okay, Todd. Well, we realized early on that it would be a great benefit for the company if there was an ergonomic partnership. So we could either create with others or an established one we could join. So fortunately, at the same time we were doing this 2 years ago, we were revamping our whole ergonomics program. But BC Construction Safety Alliance, BCCSA, they were partnering with Back in Motion, and they were going to deliver construction care, it's called. So Modern Niagara jumped at the chance to be early stakeholders in this pilot program. And just a little bit about BCCSA, it's a non-for-profit association, and it provides services to 52,000 construction companies and probably employing over 220,000 workers. So it's financed entirely through the BC construction industries. Through our WorkSafe, a small percentage of our assessments goes to this program, right? And construction care has one goal, and it's to minimize personal financial costs And that happens with delayed assessments, investigations, and the treatment following a workplace injury. So what's included in that construction care model? It's, as an employee, Modern Niagara, we had to register beforehand, and that would give construction care as much information as possible, so they would already know a lot about us, right? What type of work we do, our return to work plan, our functional abilities forms. So when an injured worker walked in, right, they already had the information and they could do the critical assessment as soon as possible. So the goal was to get the injured workers back to work, fit to work in 2 weeks. That was the goal. And one easy call to a physiotherapist, right? And what was great about this program, in Greater Vancouver, it's spread out like Toronto or the other major cities, right? But we were able to get in one of 5 different locations at a 2 p.m. time slot every single day, Monday through Friday, right? So 2 p.m. work, because most of our workers start work early. They start at 6:30, 7 in the morning, and the shifts end at 2 or 3 in the morning, right? So a 2 p.m. appointment meant if they got injured, right, it would probably be, even if it was in the morning, 2 p.m. is not too long to wait to get a physical assessment, right? And after 2 p.m., they're wrapping up to going home. So not a lot of injuries happen at that. So it was an optimum time, right? So they could also go to a location near where they live. So if they're on their way home in Langley or Abbotsford, North Vancouver, we would have a physiotherapist right there waiting for them, right? Now, the key part was if they need more serious something happened that maybe the physiotherapist couldn't handle it, they had arranged physician assessment, right? Diagnostic imaging for the very next day, right? And the results we've seen, like we had an ergonomic claims before this every few months, right? And the results where we've had 2 ergonomics claims with WorkSafe in 30 months, right? For 500 to 600 workers, it's pretty amazing. And our last one was August 2022. So another one of our results is that our injury rate as a whole in a classification unit, we're down at our level 1.1. Everybody else, that's plumbers, big companies in Vancouver, they're at 4.6. So we're over 3.5 points lower than them, right? And the WorkSafe experience, right? Like I think I mentioned before, in 2022, we had a surcharge of 27%, right? We were paying extra rates, extra premiums for the amount of injuries we had, right? So in 2023, it went down from 27% down to a 2.2% discount, which is phenomenal, right? We're so much lower than most of our competition. And for 2024, this was amazing, Todd. We went from a -2% to a -21.5%. So that's the results we're saving, hundreds of thousands of dollars on our premium rates every year. Morale has gone way up. Our workforce has less absenteeism and less first aids, less job transfer requests. So if you can get a partnership, right, with something like that in your own province, your own city, it's going to be a big help. And I can help anybody if they want to talk to me later, and I can walk them through that. Right? So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate you sharing that story because it is an impressive one. And it's something that certainly was a big part of the reason you won the gold award for Best Ergonomics Program. So, I'm just watching the time. We've got about 15 minutes left. Lisa, I kind of want to talk about, if we think about our workers, like we can't have a Sue, a Lisa, or a Ken looking over everyone's shoulders all the time, right? It's not practical. You're going to have workers who are at remote facilities or out in the field who may forget about these things and what they're supposed to do. So how do you ensure that your workers are actually, following all of these great ideas, ensuring they're doing work properly and safely and not taking shortcuts? The question is like, what role do workers play in their own ergonomic safety?
That's a really good question because Ken made this point. You can provide all the best equipment and the training and everything else, but workers are responsible for their own decisions in every moment of every day and choosing to control the things that are under their control. So So, as employers, we are ultimately responsible to support them and set them up for success with the knowledge and skills and the culture to make those safe and healthy choices. But we need to give workers the authority and the power to stop and seek support from coworkers or their supervisor so they can make conservative decisions and not proceed with things that they think may be too heavy or awkward for them, that kind of thing. So we've talked about the word culture a few times, but OPG, like many companies, has evolved our safety culture from a rules-based culture to a values-based culture. We call this our I Care safety strategy. And the idea is that we're trying to support people and get them in the mindset to choose to make the safe choice in every decision because they care about themselves and others. And then we ran that campaign for a couple of years, and then the philosophies in the safety industry are changing, and now we're building on that culture with what we call our fail-safe strategy. So this is an evolution from focusing on events and defining safety as the absence of injuries, and regarding workers as the problem that we need to fix so they don't keep making mistakes and don't do the wrong thing, to accepting and assuming that humans will make mistakes and that accidents will happen, and setting people up for success by putting multiple controls in place, by creating opportunities for safe work planning before they do their work, and not looking at blaming workers, but looking at learning from every event to prevent things from happening again. And also focusing on the fact that workers know what they need and they're often the best problem solvers. So this culture helps overcome that just get it done kind of mindset, and workers feel empowered and expected to speak up, to identify hazards and share suggestions for solutions. And technology-wise, we've created some electronic tools. So we have an electronic safe work planning app that people can access on their phone or tablet or whatever device they have out in the field. And the plan for doing the work has been worked through where they guides them to identifying hazards, guides them to appropriate controls, and tries to sort of take out the individual judgments or lack of knowledge or lack of memory, that kind of thing. Really supports people in the identification and control of hazards, and learning from previous iterations of that same task being done. It's all incorporated into the app. And specifically on the MSD prevention side of things, we are piloting a safe body mechanics training program called WorkLeet, like athlete, but WorkLeet. It's a program out of the US, and they're making some inroads into Canada, but we're finding it extremely effective. It's a different way of training workers in how to move safely, no matter what task they're doing, based on key 3 movement techniques or principles. It's a micro-learning, mini lessons repeated frequently kind of program with a peer coaching element. And the idea is to build a mental model, muscle memory, and strong movement habits, which become subconscious and automatic in every situation at work and outside of work. So preventing wear and tear on people's bodies that can lead to pain and injury. So this is another way that we've empowered workers to take ownership for their musculoskeletal health and protect themselves from injury.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Sue, kind of similar question for you. If we think about, the Canadian workforce, we do have a lot of people that are working at least part-time in remote home offices or in different locations. So what can employers do to help those workers prevent ergonomic injuries?
Yeah, so with the home office environment, certainly very different from the in-office environment. We're often working at a kitchen table, using a crummy chair. It's not comfortable, not adjustable. We are using a laptop that originally was designed for travel and not everyday use. And so keyboard's small, the screen's tiny. It's not great for our eyes, and lighting's usually poor. So, it really speaks back to education on good setup and knowing what a good setup is. But I also think, certainly at Sun Life, we were given some funds when everybody went home to use for what made sense for you in your home office. So did you need a better chair? Did you need a second monitor? But that allowed us to set up our home office in the best way we could without significant financial hardship. But maybe I didn't need a chair, but I needed a second monitor, but my colleague needed something else. It just allowed us to use those funds for what made sense for us. And I think that's important, because it goes back to sitting in a crummy position day after day, hour after hour, and you get into trouble. So I'll leave it at that. Just one other resource. Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety is an excellent website if you're also looking for resources. There's infographics on that website. I certainly direct people there all the time. But I say home office, in office, similar issues. Get the setup good and try to prevent as many issues from happening in the future.
Great, thanks, Sue. I think we'll turn it over to the audience now. We've got quite a few questions rolling in through the Q&A and also through the chat, so I'm going to bounce back and forth a bit. First question, and I'll pose this out to the panel, whoever wants to jump in. This person says, we have equipment operators that are presenting with tendinitis in the elbows. The equipment they operate are moving not with a steering wheel, but with joysticks. So what suggestions do you have to prevent tendinitis? They work about 8 to 10 hours a day.
Well, you have to look at the risk factors of force, posture, and repetition. So is there anything that can be done about the force required to operate the joystick? Is there anything that can be done to modify the joystick to create a better arm and wrist posture? Is there anything that can be done about the time element? Can they vary their job, or can there be a second way of operating a control rather than a joystick? Some of these things that require modifying equipment are tricky. So, we call them engineering controls versus administrative controls. So if you can modify equipment or get different equipment that reduces the risk factors, that's called an engineering control. If you're looking at things like job rotation or training or PPE, things like that, that's more of administrative control. So combination of whatever you can do to reduce those three risk factors of force, posture, and time are is the way to tackle that. And tendinitis is a typical MSD, something caused by overexertion in one way or another of those three risk factors.
Great, thank you. Next question here. What are some effective treatments for MSD injuries, and which of these are covered by health insurance plans?
I think that might be a benefits question too. But
I mean, I'm in Alberta, and physiotherapy is not covered through the health insurance plan unless it's acute injury and you're recovering from a surgery. But yeah, I mean, that's a tricky question. Benefit plans, depending on the benefit plan an employer purchases, will determine how much physio or chiro or massage that each individual employee receives. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
In Vancouver, we have a sheet metal union and the piping plumbing union, and they have excellent benefits. It's just getting the guys and the gals to actually use it, right? Because they have $500, $750 a year for a physiotherapist, a massage therapist, chiropractor, osteopath. They have all these benefits, and it's just getting them to use them. And it's encouraging them, because why waste it? It's part of your package, so go ahead and use it, right?
Yeah. And I think the other comment from the benefit, just really quickly from the benefit side of things, making sure that your benefit plan is actually adequate. If you've got $200 for physio, that's not very adequate. So if you're in an environment where there's a lot of physical injuries, really look at your plan design and say, so do you need more physio coverage versus say something else, because that's going to support your employees more. So I think plan design is really, really important when you're looking at a benefit, the benefit coverage that is suitable for your employees, and don't just be so, cookie cutter that everything's the same. I think that would be one call out I would make. Look at your defined maximums, what's included in that maximum of paramedical coverage, and really, really look at it, make sure it works for you.
Great. Ken, I think this one's for you. We've got some people that are kind of intrigued about that same day and next day physician assessments and physiotherapy. Doesn't say what province they're in, but if somebody wants to do this, how do you begin? How do you get that who do you contact?
Okay, it's BCCSA in British Columbia, and it's called Contractor Care. And what it worked is Back in Motion, that's the physiotherapist company. And what it worked for them, because they had so many locations around Greater Vancouver, that was why they were partnered up. And the same day physiotherapist is great. Now, the same next day physician assessment, I think that's kind of it's stretching. When it was first great the first year, and now it could be a bit longer, right? But BCCSA actually paid for these 2 p.m. appointments. So anybody who was could just get in there, right? You could just, it was not first come, first serve, but they just had these 2 p.m. appointments at these certain locations, 5 different locations, right? And sometimes they would let you in earlier or whatever, but BC actually paid, and that was funded from their research development program. And I think WorkSafe actually picked that up because they saw the amazing results of how well it was working, right? So if you don't have that in your province, I would maybe contact your Construction Safety Association, say, maybe we should follow the BC model because it actually works well.
Oh, great, Ken. Next question here. This person is talking about how companies have annual clinics for flu shots and health assessments. Has anyone experienced a company putting on an MSD clinic to privately assess workers according to their position and lifestyle? Is that something you've seen or done?
Interesting. Nope, not, I've never heard of that from my standpoint.
Me neither, but that would be great.
Yeah, so it sounds like the panel has not seen that, but it's certainly an interesting idea. Just looking, we've got probably time for one more question. Just kind of scrolling through here. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Very engaged audience today. So we talked about this maybe a little bit, but increased reporting can be seen as a measure of success of the program. If you're not seeing an increase in reporting, does that mean the program's not quite hitting the mark?
That's a really good question. There's other ways to measure success and impact. Maybe discomfort surveys, maybe some kind of assessment, self-assessment type of thing, talking to people in the field to see what their awareness is, whether they're talking about MSD hazards in their pre-job tailboard talks and things like that. There's other ways to evaluate what's going on other than the injuries being reported or the discomfort being reported. So definitely want to move towards leading indicators in general in safety. So there's a lot of options for what you could look at there.
And I would add absenteeism. Is there a change in absenteeism? Possibly turnover as well. So there's other ways to sort of indirectly see the impact.
Sure. And I think I'll make this our last question because we're at the top of the hour, but I do want to ask it. Any suggestions from the panel on what to do with employees from diverse backgrounds, especially with, English as a second language, communication issues, and they also mentioned cognitive ergonomics standpoint. So if you've got workers that, don't necessarily speak English well, how do you communicate these programs?
Well, one of the big things that we've recognized in general in our organization is that peer coaching is really, really effective. So maybe there's a partner who's bilingual in different languages, English and other, you can find people who can help be interpreters or supportive coaches, peer coaches to people, I would say, and providing your information in multiple languages if you have a population that's big enough to support that. It's an interesting society we live in now, then it's a big challenge. One of the people I heard recently said they use Google Translate a lot. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's good. So I think we're going to have to end it here. I will say there's a lot of very nice comments in here about just thanking everybody for joining this panel today. The last one that just popped in here, they're asking, could we have another session with the same panelists on the same topic? We want to learn more. So that's a nice compliment to end on. So thank you so much, Sue, Lisa, and Ken, for joining us. Appreciate you sharing your expertise. I always learn a lot during these conversations. I know the audience appreciates it. So on behalf of OHS Canada, I just want to thank you for taking your time to share your expertise. I also want to thank everybody for dialing in today, for joining us. Just a reminder that you will receive a link to this recording at the same email address that you used to register. So keep an eye out for that. That will come in 24 hours. So again, thanks everybody. On behalf of our sponsor, Sun Life, we wish you all a safe rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, everybody.